Part 1, the press. My story begins with a press conference of a linguistic breakthrough, whale songs deciphered. The Sedna Project, a collaboration between Cornell University and the AI startup Metazoic, at a press conference announced that they have solved 2 humpback whale dialects, meaning that they can now render whale communication into English, using a large language model trained on a database of extensive marine audio recordings. On stage, lead biologist Dr. Levy presents a snippet of whale language that exhibits parallel speech of the whales, where 2 phrases are uttered separately yet simultaneously. In this case, the text reads, "Hear me, O name, great listener, great knower, my little noun, her loss I can no longer bear it. In your audience is my song, my concept. She was my future, so take 2, my present, from these loud yet empty seas." Dr. Tai Wu, chief linguist on the project, reacts. She says, "At its core, language is simply a vehicle for transmitting thoughts and feelings. In this case, we have a mother who has lost her calf. And even through translation, I can feel the immense pain in her words. This whale is suffering, no different than a human mother." This parallel phrase that we have shared, it's an observation about change in the environment, and it's also an appeal to someone, perhaps even a deity. It certainly resembles speech patterns used by humans in religious settings. What I see is desperation. It's almost apocalyptic. I mean, is this really a surprise? We have depleted global fish stocks. We have saturated every ocean with microplastics, and now we're mining the seafloor. All of these actions add up, and I believe we're finally seeing the emotional turmoil caused by this worldwide ecological disaster. Outside the event, a protester is interviewed regarding Metazoic's claim that Bioglossia will aid in conservation efforts. She says, "Well, first, there's the issue of privacy. If these animals are smart enough to have language, then they're deserving of privacy. Second, how can we be certain that these AI tools won't be used to exploit animals? I worry about militarizing wildlife. I want to see a ban on defense companies using this technology ASAP." In response, we hear from Dr. Hill, a bioethicist unaffiliated with the project. He says, "Concerns are valid here. In the event of human to animal translation, there is a risk of ecological manipulation. I would expect a ban on human to animal translation in the near term, at least out in the field. With the right controls, it should be straightforward to prevent abuse. However, with regard to listening alone, we're probably going to see immediate implementation. On balance, I expect an exponentially better understanding of these animals' lives, which will advance both science and conservation. Perhaps most importantly, this technology offers humanity a better shot at understanding ourselves and our place in nature. I just hope we'll be able to handle it." Part 2, the professor. In the closing remarks to his book, the professor begins to build an analogy to help skeptical readers grapple with new evidence of language use in insects. He says, "Insects were the first group of animals to take to the air, approximately 300 million years ago, long before any human ever walked on Earth. Humans, a wingless creature, might initially seem out of sorts in such a timeline, but we know different. Through mind and hand, our species quite literally soars above and beyond all of our animal neighbors. We began flying a measly 120 years ago. 66 years later, in a blink of Earth's eye, we flew out of the atmosphere into the moon." He then explains that researchers at the Intelligence and Sensing Lab at Osaka University recently discovered that ants' utilization of pheromones constitutes a language that can be rendered into English. They accomplished this through feeding data from 3-dimensional chemosensors, similar to those deployed on the Mars Curiosity rover, into a Bioglossia mainframe. Here is an example sentence uttered by one of the ants in the first IS Lab study. Follow, follow, now, 4, 3, 9, Formica. The professor continues, this suggestion that ants speak to one another more than any other example of Bioglossia has sparked the most extensive controversy. But why? Perhaps it is because it strikes so close to the human self-perception as the pinnacle of sophistication of Earth. And perhaps if even a tiny and insignificant ant utilizes language, then we are forced to reconsider the status of each and every organism between us and that ant in our imagined value hierarchy. And why would it ever stop there? If we all share language, where does that leave humanity? In this way, recognition feels a lot more like reckoning. This can challenge even the most open-minded people, but I encourage my readers to remember that just next year, human beings will set foot on Mars, and that accomplishment is in no way diminished by the wondrous and majestic flight of this planet's many bugs, birds, and bats. Yes, we may only be fifth in flight, but we fly to other worlds. Likewise, our voices are not lost in the great chorus of planet Earth. Part 3, the President.
And now, an important message from the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Early this morning, in violation to recent amendments to the Endangered Species Act and the National Marine Sanctuaries Act, a group of students at the University of California, Berkeley, posted a video that appeared to show, for the first time, human beings conversing with a whale via machine translation software. So tonight, I want to take a moment to address the significance of this action and the implications for this country. However, in order to continue in a productive manner, I will first speak to the circumstances of that video and the validity of its claims. Taking advantage of a lapse in security during the Thanksgiving holiday break, last Thursday, 4 PhD students affiliated with UC Berkeley's Artificial Intelligence Research Group, a federally funded laboratory, misappropriated equipment intended for the study of language use in non-human animals, or Bioglossia. The equipment included an advanced aquatic microphone, a computer system containing a controlled version of the Bioglossia software capable of human-to-animal translation, and a specialized speaker device capable of transmitting audio audible to whales. Here, I must note that research and development with respect to any of these three tools has never been classified. However, their deployment, particularly in combination, has always been subject to strict regulation. These students smuggled this equipment onto a privately owned vessel and sailed to the Gulf of the Frones National Marine Sanctuary, a protected area known for its humpback whale sightings. There, they began recording a video of their linguistic contact with a whale. For approximately 1.5 hours, they exchanged words with the animal, facilitated by generative artificial intelligence, before their speaker component failed. The students, in coordination with a major news outlet, waited 5 days until today to go public with their recording. Earlier this afternoon, federal authorities apprehended all 4 students on charges relating to theft and illegal AI-facilitated contact with wildlife. A complete transcript of their conversation will be posted soon. But for now, my administration, informed by analysis from scientists at NOAA and NSA, is confirming the authenticity of that conversation. In short, we have spoken to whales, and they have answered us. Notwithstanding the unfortunate circumstances surrounding this act, it is indeed an extraordinary accomplishment of science and a momentous cause for celebration. So you would be right to ask, why do universities across this country have access to all the tools necessary to conduct human-to-animal translation if such an activity is prohibited under federal law? In short, it is because we have no other choice. Where there is discovery, there is America. And now, as it becomes possible to converse in the many languages of life on Earth, we must move toward greater knowledge, lest we forgo important progress in the sciences and become content in our ignorance. Should the day come that this planet receive visitors from a distant world, I would like to think, having perfected these tools, that we may greet these visitors as understanding neighbors rather than suspicious adversaries. That being said, the legal status of this technology has always been a temporary measure to forestall its premature implementation. Like a new vaccine or a vehicle, we must ensure a minimum standard of safety before exposing our communities and environment to substantial risk. Right now, we cannot afford to live in a world in which nefarious actors control or otherwise manipulate wild animals for their private gain. Equally so, we cannot sacrifice this opportunity to better appreciate nature and our place in it. Momentarily, I will sign an executive order that tightens controls and increases monitoring on designated research facilities across this country. In the interim, I hope that you find optimism, as I do, in knowing that when the time is right, we will be strangers no more. Thank you, and good night.
The mugshots of the Berkeley whale whisperers. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great, so questions? Yes.
Hi. So in this talk, you're going to talk about this technology being developed. Thanks. So in this talk, you were kind of talking about this technology being developed in the hands of academia. And I'm wondering if you would comment, do you think it would be better or significantly different in any way if this was being developed by private industry or within the confounds of some kind of, or otherwise on the other end, like completely government controlled and not kind of government funding to an institution?
Yeah, I think that with academia, you run less of a risk that the technology is being developed for profit, essentially. But I don't think that that's necessarily out of the question with somewhat of a revolving door that can exist between academia and like private industry. I think that I think there is actually I think there may be a breaking down of the differences between what this technology would look like when developed in academia versus private industry. I think that I do struggle to wonder what the government would want with technology like this beyond either wildlife management or military application. I mean, in the past, the US government and the Soviet Union have used trained dolphins in I don't know if, maybe we'll never know if they were used in actual military operations, but they were at least trained to assist with espionage. So I guess in thinking about the scope of possibilities, yeah, that maybe it would all look the same. There's only so many things that I think you can do with this technology. Yeah.
Thank you.
Further questions? Yes, Asu.
Thank you very much for the great presentation. I was wondering, what are some, in your mind, negative implications of deploying this technology? You mentioned this is banned, or somebody mentioned, and if you think about making this more broadly available, what would be the way you would envision deploying this? What would be the guardrails?
I think in a disaster scenario, a technology like this proliferates and becomes available to all of us. And we can begin using animals, negotiating with animals to like harm our nemesis. Like if I have a problem with my neighbor, I could maybe negotiate with a bear or something to ruin their car. I think personally, when I think about this technology, I think that is the biggest risk of people going and having this sort of interspecies relationship that previously did not exist. I think many animals, especially in North America, naturally fear humanity, and I think they're right in doing so. I think that we have a bad track record of interacting with animals. We are very exploitative, and I think that technology like this would rapidly break down that barrier if you could communicate one-on-one. So.
Great. Yoon.
How do you define language?
In my world, it's sort of it's fairy dust. But how do I define language? I guess if I had to come up with a definition right on the spot, like I am now, it would be a system of communication with interchangeable variables that is used to convey information that one unit has to another unit. And so, yeah.
No, okay, great. Karen.
Hi, thank you very much. I wondered if you've thought, you have thoughts about some of the conceptual issues involved in the idea of translating whale language into English, about whether it's even in principle possible. So you might wonder whether the conceptual scheme of beings whose form of life is so different from ours is really commensurable with ours, or whether there really are determinate facts about what exactly whales mean when they say things. And if you have thoughts about those kinds of obstacles to this project.
Right, yeah, I was thinking about that because even with humans, which we're all the same species, our lifestyle and cultural differences can create a vast diversity in language. And so when you're thinking about an entirely different species, how that would manifest in language, that's kind of why I chose to represent whale language as having like this parallel character, that they utter two sentences at the same time. And that also provides justification for why we would need this advanced AI to be able to like actually pick apart those elements. No human, even if you could change the frequency, profile of a recording, no human could hope to ever translate that language. And so you need essentially the black box of AI to step in and extract that. Similarly with the ants, they don't communicate audibly, they excrete essentially a puff of biomolecules that have varying gradients in 3 dimensions. And so you need sort of an advanced array of cameras and sensors and also this Bioglossia, this like magic Bioglossia software to essentially take in a vast amount of data and render it into English. And then there's the issue of translation. Just in the most basic terms, you could think of translation, you are doing like literal translations word for word, or you could do conceptual translations. I think for the whales, I kind of chose a mix. That was my implication. It's sort of written in a poetic way, but has sections where concept can't be translated, so it's just concept or name. And so I think even in a world where we could, and there is a project, SETI, the Cetacean Translation Initiative, they're trying to translate whale language. If they're successful, I imagine that there will be a lot of holes, and it will be difficult to actually pull out because certain concepts are probably exclusive to whales. Just as with humans, it's sometimes hard to do like efficient translations because we have idioms or just different cultural understandings of different concepts.
Yeah, thank you. That was a wonderful presentation, and I enjoyed reading the paper along the way. So congratulations. I wonder if we could try to pinpoint would this imagined but maybe not so far off set of ML or AI tools, do these introduce a difference of kind or of degree? And so, that might have implications for the types of regulations or controls or use cases that you imagine and want to encourage on one hand and also maybe control against on the other. So there have been centuries of careful studies of various wildlife in situ. There have been decades of language studies for various species of birds and primates and dolphins. And there have been decades of federal regulations regarding animal research, at least in academic settings that take federal funds. So are we talking about, is this extending from what we already have seen before, or is this somehow really a qualitative break? The first example you highlight is a privacy concern, and is the privacy of translating putative language going to be that much different than the privacy concerns of watching animals in controlled field sites, day and night? So I wonder, again, is it a degree or is it kind? How does that have implications for the nature of the controls or the use cases you imagine? Thanks.
I think the issue that you brought up about privacy is interesting. Yeah, in this story, there are characters who are concerned about privacy, talking about privacy. But you're right, we have observed these animals thus far for centuries, and this doesn't seem to be a concern of privacy. Thinking about like the cultural perspective of a whale, does a whale have a sense of privacy? I mean, it essentially, all of its communication, what we do know is that its communication can travel for miles under the sea. Whales do not inhabit buildings, they are floating through the vast sea. And so, yeah, I think the development of if this technology developed, I do imagine that we would be quick to try to apply our honestly our narrow human understanding of life onto every single one of these animals. And yeah.
Great. We've got time for one last question.
Hi, I think it's a really cool idea. Thank you for the presentation. My question's a little bit more random, but with Bioglossia, how do you think zoos would change?
I think the first change is that you would have a little speaker box, like a little gimmicky speaker box, and that there would be like a constant stream. I mean, probably most of the time it would just be static. But occasionally, there would be people who are like, "Oh no, look, it's saying something right now," and it would probably be very boring actually at the zoo, because animals, I think, I'm making some assumptions here, but when I go to the zoo, the animals look pretty bored. They're not very talkative. Maybe in an ant enclosure or something like that, it may enhance the excitement of insect enclosures. Let's say ants could talk. It could be very active and vibrant. It might change the dynamic. People would be less interested in elephants, and they suddenly want to go to see what the ants are saying. And hearing like ants calling for war and debating each other, and it might be more morbid curiosity, but yeah, that's the changes.
Thank you.